I want to say the last time I was up here, I think it was down here, if I can remember correctly. But this is something I've been thinking about for a long time, for at least 4 or 5 months. Something I've just been pondering. Probably, I don't know how many of you know me that well, but I like science a whole bunch. Like, I really, really, really like science. So I'm going to share just a little bit of that with you. And this message will be titled, Proof There Is a God. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to use science to prove there is a God. So this is an attempt to answer an age-old question, is there a God? I'm sure you've heard many people asking that question all the time, and that's what we're going to try to do today, to determine if God exists. Now, to do that, we're going to use three things that are universal: light, space, time, and we're going to glue them together with math. So we're just going to talk just a little bit about it. So the idea for this message came from Psalms 19:1, which is, the heavens declare the glory of Elohim, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. I don't know how many of you actually look outside and see his handiwork or think much of it. I think a lot of it, because it's a lot more complicated than it just looks. So we're just going to get just a little bit into that, just so you can help understand how good and how awesome Yahweh actually is. So from this verse comes this journey. So glory, when it says the heavens declare the glory of Elohim, glory is high renown or honor won by notable achievements, magnificence, or great beauty. So that's what glory means in that verse. And that's the Webster's dictionary. The Strong's says splendor or honor. And I believe that we're going to attempt to explain a little bit of that is glory. Give him a little more praise. So for this journey, we got to know a little bit of a definition of a term called a light year. Anyone ever heard of that? Okay, a light year is equivalent to the distance that light travels in 1 year, which is pretty far. A light year is 9,000, or let's see, I use this dictionary. It's almost 6 trillion miles per year. That's how far it travels, which is really far. Our nearest light source is 0.00001581 light years away, and our sun seems pretty close, but it's just that much of a light year away. Now, I know at least some of you know this. My mom mentioned this before, that the sunlight kind of takes a long time to get to Earth. It takes about 8 minutes and 20 seconds to get to Earth. So being that light travels really fast, we're really close to the sun as far as the big picture is concerned. It still takes 8 minutes and 20 seconds for the light to reach us. So a light year is really, really, really far away. Remember that. So we've got to use a larger distance to measure things in space, because everything in space is very vast and very far away. So we need a big measure to measure that stuff that's really far away. So to calculate that light year, we use an Earth year. For those of you who don't know, 1 Earth year is 365 days, 0.24238. So it's longer than 365 days. This is why we have a leap year. A leap year comes from the day actually being slightly longer. So all calendars have this thing called a leap year. And it is necessary to keep months and proper seasons using this leap year. Because let's say if we didn't have a leap year, eventually November, it'd be summertime. So that's the purpose of a leap year. Now, another thing that helps us keep seasons, I'm going to get to the light year pretty soon. Another thing that helps us keep seasons is the moon. We use our moon to calculate our months and seasons. The moon has a cycle of being visible and not visible. It's not invisible, it's just not seen. Because there are the times with the new moon, you got to look outside and there's nothing there. It's still there. And if you don't know, it takes the moon about 30 days to do its cycle. And just using the moon to calculate would be wrong. Because we're aiming to be very accurate as far as keeping time. And now, aiming for the accuracy, we look at something else. We have Earth we live on, and the amount of sunlight that shines on the Earth changes about every 3 months. That sunlight is the difference in temperature change. These temperature changes we call seasons. So, how do we get seasons? We get seasons from the angle that the Earth sits. If we look at the globe, if you've seen one of those things that sits on a weird angle, about 23 degrees and between 21 and 24 degrees. That tilt angle is what causes the seasons. So like, where is this gone? The seasons come from not the distance to the sun, but specifically that angle. Now, if you didn't know that the sun is one of those stars, all this is going to come together. So the sun's one of those stars we see at night. And if you didn't know, a familiar star thing like the Big Dipper, there's a bunch of stars also. The stars from the Big Dipper that we see are 79 light years to 123 light years away. So that light travels real far just to get to us. And the Big Dipper is a constellation, which is a group of stars. And all these things between the moon that causes our seasons, the sunlight which causes our days, all the constellations in the sky, we use all those things to determine time. So all the lights we see come from the stars in the sky, which we use to determine our time. And I'm sure you've noticed, it's very consistent. It's all that consistency. Every year you're going to have spring, summer, fall, winter. Every month you're going to have a full moon. You're going to have a new moon. And it's the same all the time, every year. That consistency is how we tell our time. Now, if we look at Genesis 1:14 through 18, we see, and Elohim said, "Let there be lights in the firmament above the heaven to divide the day from night. And let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And Elohim made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night, sun and moon. He made the stars also. And Elohim set them in a firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth and to rule over the day and night and to divide the light from the darkness. And Elohim saw it was good. So in that verse, we see that we're given all these stars, seasons, sunlight, and the moon to tell time. That's all their purpose is just to tell time. Now, you might wonder, like, if everything in the sky is a light, not necessarily. Like their moon, it don't produce its own light. It actually reflects light. And just a small percent of sunlight it reflects, just 3 and 12% is how much it reflects, which isn't a lot. But when you see a full moon, it lights up the whole sky at night. And sometimes we'll see these things that we think are stars like Mars and Venus. They'll look really close and be able to see them nice and bright. And we'll be like, oh, that's a nice bright star, but they're planets. They don't produce their own light. They reflect it. And all these planets, the moon, the stars are all just used to tell time. And all this extra light from the sun also causes the weather to change. So to me, at least, light plays a big role in keeping time. Now, I put time and light kind of together in the same time, in the same category, because they all are part of the same thing. Time and light and space are all the exact same thing. One needs the other one to exist, more or less. So, we learned the light years really far, but we don't know how fast light goes. Believe it or not, light's very fast. If you was the Flash, you would not be able to outrun light, as far as the rules of the universe is concerned. Light speed is 186,000 miles per second. That's why it takes 8 minutes and 20 seconds for the light to hit the earth, which warms this up. And when it sets, it's actually set 8 minutes ago. But we don't see that until 8 minutes later. So if you could travel the speed of light, you could go around the earth 7.5 times in just 1 second. Speed of light's important for space and time because it is the speed limit of the universe. Nothing goes faster than the speed of light. So because light is the main rule, space and time has to adjust, has to flex to it. The faster you go, space and time will have to change because nothing goes faster than light. So that is the maximum. And everything else is relative. So the role of light being consistent is very important because over time, without keeping track of its changes, we'll be off, like with the leap year. So thus, time is basically a system that allows us to record the past, keep track of now, and anticipate the future. So light plays a big role in time. You might wonder if light affects everything. It does not. Light don't affect sound, and they don't really interact. So how do we keep time even with something like sound? Time is in everything, even in us. Like if you used to live in a dark room, you would feel a natural time without light. So light doesn't make time. It's the rhythms of things like light, seasons, all those things is what makes time. But then this one day happened in Joshua 10:13, or Joshua 10:11 through 13. We get this incident that messes with time. As a story when Joshua and them were fighting and they were losing and they needed some time they were winning. They needed some more time because the enemy was fleeing and they needed that time to go get them and wipe them out once and for all. And we know what happened, right? The earth stopped. But if the earth stopped, that means something had to happen with light, something had to happen with the planets, the other ones, something had to happen with the other stars. It wasn't just this planet specifically. So if you think about as complicated as just the stuff I just described, apply that to this story, how much more interesting it becomes. Yahweh didn't just stop the planet. the sun and moon didn't just stand still. And I found this to be a cool fact, that if the earth suddenly stopped, since it's spinning really fast, all the stuff on the planet will be shook loose. Kind of like if you're in a car accident and get the whiplash, that effect will happen. But it didn't. So a simple miracle in the Bible becomes a little more, at least to me, interesting on what could actually happen. He didn't just do something small, he did it real big. And this is something I also found interesting, that the Amorites were sun and moon worshipers, which are the people they were fighting. So for these deities to have been forced to obey the laws of Elohim, that must have been a bad experience for the Amorites. So all this science stuff goes into an even bigger picture, and Yahweh uses giant stuff like that and just picks on people. I don't want to say pick on. He puts them in their place. He's like, there's no other gods besides him, and he lets everybody know that. Another interesting thing about that incident is that we just know that Joshua had a longer day, but some people had longer nights, longer mornings, longer evenings. We don't take note of that. Like people, if you look at some history things, you'll see some evidence of that, like the long night. It's just proof of the long day. So considering that what Yahweh didn't just do, we'll just say his hands are not too short to do anything. So regardless if the planet stopped or slowed down, none of that matters, because it's all big problems if it really happened and Yahweh wasn't the one doing it. So time does not apply to Yahweh, which is good on our part. Now, since time and space are usually one thing, we call them space-time because they're the same thing. Let's figure out what space is. In Psalms 19:1, the heavens declare, are referring to the heavens. Are they referring to the outer space? Maybe like the atmosphere? I dare say that it's referring to space in general. Sky, atmosphere, and outer space. So let's start small and go big. Anyone know what this is? Wow, y'all paid attention in science class. I'm proud. I'm really proud of y'all. Got some stand-up people. I missed some of that class, I can tell you that. A whole year of it. Now, we got this nice, cool picture of what an atom is, but we have no idea of the size of it. So, here's a good question for you. Why should you never trust an atom? They make everything up. It's the truth, though. They do. So, since atoms make everything up, they're in the air we breathe, the food we eat, the clothes we wear. And if you look at the picture of the atom, you see it has like these little dots in the middle. And then it has these weird-looking circles on the outside. We call those floaty, spinny things around it. We're going to call those electrons, like electricity. That's where we get that from. All the light you see is from utilizing that stuff. So these things are really tiny. If you was to draw a line or two lines from the moon and connect the lines to the penny standing on its side and continue to follow the lines, that's about the normal scale size of an atom. We know the moon's pretty big and the penny's pretty small. So if you continue the lines down, you'll get to the size of an atom. But that's kind of a hard scale to grasp. So let's say we'll make a bigger scale. We'll use like a medicine ball is the size of the middle of an atom. We'll say the medicine ball is the middle of that. not a medicine ball, a exercise ball. You know, on the balls you see people stretching on. Let's say that's about 3 feet in diameter ball. The electron would be the size of a ball on a pen. You know, the thing that you write with? That thing that transfers the ink is a ball. So on the scale side, you got this 3-foot ball, and you have a small ball on a pen. And you're like, you're talking about space. What does this have to do with space? The space in between the middle of the atom and that electron will be about 31 miles. So there's a lot of space between those. So considering there's that much space, how is anything solid? That doesn't make sense to me. I don't know how things are solid if there's space in between everything. There's so much space in between these things that if you took out all the space in just between all the people on the planet, we'd be about the size of an apple. That's how much space these things have. You might be wondering, like, you mentioned music before, and light don't affect music. Not really. But space affects music. Let's say if I was no space between the words I'm saying, it'd be one word. If I was to play one note on a piano, and it was to continuously play, that wouldn't be like no music. See, in these things we look for a rhythm. Like, let's say a song, it's beginning to rain. It's beginning to rain, rain, rain. And that, we got a little rhythm thing. We got a 3-3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And a song like We Will Rock You, there's a space in there. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That space is a rest. So even in music, we see these important spaces. So what is space? I see space like this. Space is something that could be bent and stretched because it has to apply the rules of light. So it has to be flexible. It's just not visible. Now space, I see it like space is the very canvas which everything is painted on. It's like a blank picture. It's like a stage waiting for its actors. And these little small things hang in space, which we're all taking up a part of space. So let's see the vastness of space. Okay, because it's hard to explain how big space is without actually seeing something like that. So if you think of all them tiny things that we call atoms that are really, really small, they make all of that up, which sits in space, and we can see how vast space is. So space being that vast, it's like it's everywhere. So looking at that thing, I think of things like, wow. And of course, we have people like the unbeliever that says, this is all by chance. So I don't see how that's possible with all of those stars, galaxies, and the little things we call atoms make all that up, and everything just happens to be in the exact same form and fashion for us to exist. Now, when I look at that picture, I think of when Joshua was fighting and made the day a little bit longer. He stopped all of that. So it's not just the earth and the moon. So it's like really big. So even though it might seem like, oh, he just stopped for a day, know that Yahweh doing things at work is a lot more takes place. And it still fascinates me that the atoms are small and with all that space in between them, that there's solids, liquids, and gas. Like how there's space in between these things, and yet they're solid. I will never understand that. And of course, it's all by chance, says the unbeliever. Like the coolest thing I seen on that video was the thing that says there's more stars than sand on earth, but more atoms in one grain of sand than in all the stars. So you got just this little grain of sand that has more atoms than all the stars. And we've seen there's a lot of stars. So this place is very complicated, but it all happened by chance. So if you can't find yourself to see the heavens declare the awesomeness of Yahweh, how about this then? We're going to look at the math behind all of this. This here is going to be the very, very simple equation that I'm going to be using to explain God exists. Or not. I'm really not going to use an equation as complicated as that. We learn in math that there are these things like the Pythagorean theorem, pi, or MC, or M equals MC squared. We learn about these things, and some people think that I invented this math problem. I invented this. But that stuff's never invented. It's just discovered. All the stuff's here. And all math does is to help us understand how things really work. And as you've seen from that one picture, math can get really complicated. Like this right here is what we call pi, 3/14, and the rest of these numbers. But that number works in almost, I'll just be nice and say everything. It helps us calculate the path that an Amazon river takes. That could be calculated with math. So math, even the scientists agree that it is the universal language simply because it works. So having seen my complicated formula, I will show you the real formula to prove that there is a God. This simple math problem, all little kids know how to solve it. So let's use an example. If we use 1 for A and 1 for B, what is C? Wow! Woo! Real simple. Seeing this easy problem, some people believe that 0 plus 0 equals everything. So, looking at the equation, we learn that they say something came from nothing. But math, which everyone agrees that it's the universal language, it's impossible. From them looking probably at the two big formulas, forget the simple stuff. So if the equation is A plus B equals everything in existence, then A or B must be something too. So everything and anything with an age has a beginning and an end. And they determine things like that with things like carbon dating, which is accurate. So we have to make things fit for that. But that'll be something that we could talk about one day. Now, since everything has an age, the universe has an age, it had a beginning. Age means something began, and it will end. So if none of you know the answer to this question, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Right, the chicken came first. So you need something to have something else. You can't have an egg and then end up hatching by itself. It needs the chicken. So something needed a beginning. So how do we get our beginning? We need a so-called parent. So since you need something to get something, we have to have a parent. And in order to have something before anything exists, it can't have an age. The laws of the universe, like space and time and light, can't apply to it, as you're seeing in that Joshua story. So it had to have been before all of that. And knowing that we know 0 plus 0 equals nothing, then we know that math problem has to be something like 0 plus something. And that something turned out to be Yahweh, which made everything. So something plus anything equals everything. If that something did not exist, if that something did exist outside of time and space, they would be ever present. Having been the source for all matter, be all powerful, because they created it. We know splitting the atoms, make the hydrogen bombs, those things are very powerful. But this created that. Having the knowledge of the source of existence and putting it into motion must be all-knowing. So something that is all-present, all-powerful, all-knowing, they sound like how we describe Yahweh. Interesting. So how do you think Yahweh describes himself? He says his name is Yahweh. That's how he describes himself. But sometimes we don't know what that means. Does anyone know what Yahweh means? Self-existent one, needs nothing. And that's exactly what that little math problem proved. You have to have something before you get something else. But since everything has an age on it, it can't be anything that was here. It had to be something before anything ever happened. And that's how we get Yahweh, being God, and that's the simple math problem. So here's how I normally would have presented this message. God exists for the heavens declare. Looking around the heavens, we see birds, clouds, sun, moon, and stars. For the stars are more plentiful than sand, and atoms in one grain of sand are more plentiful than the stars. Atoms make up the birds, clouds, sun, and moon, of which all these things hang in space. And that goes with the flow of time, governed by both the space and the speed of light. And all of these things can be explained of how or why by the universal language of math. And since we all know 0 plus 0 equals nothing, then something, Yahweh, created everything. And that something is self-existent, not relying on anything. Thus we have the name Yahweh. Amen. Hopefully y'all learned something.